Where do political party interests really lie? Pen name, Josephine Peace. Poli-Sci 110. Professor B.W. Introduction. The American political system is dynamic in nature. It has changed consistently and effectively since its beginning. Being that power is not usually a commodity that transfers easily, there are those institutions or individuals who look to secure power beyond the limitations of 2-year or 4-year terms of political office. That is where interest groups come into play. When a group of constituents want to reinforce their needs, they organize themselves to push the issues and the policy decisions that they desire. These interest groups have now become powerful players on the stage of American democracy. Over time, they have been able to influence all branches of government, e.g., judges, congressmen, and presidents. Interest groups, by definition, are morally neither right nor wrong. However, contemporary interest groups can operate in ways that do not realistically reflect the mindset of those that they technically represent. Modern interest groups have become something new altogether, more or less setting their own agendas and then directing their base to support the political decisions of the organization. The average citizen is usually unaware of the mechanisms that grant interest groups the ability to influence policy. They employ 3 major tactics to affect political groups through large monetary contributions, petitioning, and demonstrating. Although they can garner support from millions of people, generally speaking, they serve the needs of a few particularly powerful individuals. It stands to be stated that interest groups are not distinct groups. The origins and workings of an interest group differ from one another. However, clarifying the dynamics of these groups both in their purest forms and in their most realistic forms is the ultimate objective in informing civilians about the ongoings of the American political system. What is an interest group? An interest group, pressure group, or lobby can be defined as an organization of people or a letterhead organization sharing a common interest or goal that seeks to influence the making of public policy. Wilson, 2009. As we can see, the definition is rather vague and leaves room for interpretation. This is best demonstrated by James Arnold when questioned by Senator Sherman Minton, D. Mr. Arnold, what is a lobby? Senator Minton, I am asking you. You ought to know. Mr. Arnold, I am asking the chairman to define a lobby. We would all like to know what it is. Senator Minton, you have some definite ideas about it, haven't you? Mr. Arnold, no, I do not think I have. I have never been able to find out. We talk about lobbyists and about laws against them and for them. But what is lobbying? Quoted in Loomis, 2009. James Arnold was a lobbyist in the early 20th century that set the tone for the way lobbies operate today. He employed 2 particularly important tactics, which he named developing sentiment and educational work, Loomis, 2009, that were questionable at best and even criminal according to political scientist Peter Odegaard in his studies of the Anti-Saloon League and other interest groups of the time. He found that interest groups used manipulation of public opinion, bluffing, subterfuge, and even misdirection as integral parts of their politics. They garnered success pressuring officials by exaggerating their importance, identifying themselves with larger interest, and speaking for whole categories of loose aggregates, and even regions of popular causes which they were not truly affiliated. James Arnold and other lobbyists of the early 20th century left an indelible mark on interest groups, politics. Lobbyists of present have done little to resolve our continued ambivalence toward their profession. Loomis, 2009. Relationship between officials and political interest groups. Today, much of American politics are played out between political interest groups and the elected representatives of the people. This falls in line with James Madison's sentiment when he wrote about the advantages of the new American government. The true distinction between these and the American governments lies in the total exclusion of the people in their collective capacity. Madison G, 1788. Once the constituents put their representatives in office, they are no longer necessary, according to Guinier, 2008. Only those with the most wisdom and most virtue should hold office, and the people having elected officials should defer to them. Page 6. Interest groups have come to have close, long-standing relationships with policymakers, and these relationships have brought about great power. This power buys influence and results. The National Rifle Association, NRA, is one of the leading public interest groups for gun rights, and they, along with other supporters, have donated over $350,000 to the Senate Judiciary Committee alone since 2000, in comparison to $17,000 from pro-gun control interest groups. This same committee will have the charge of voting on a bill to ban assault weapons, if the bill itself were not controversial enough. When you weigh in the large amounts of money that loom over the hearings, one wonders if gun control will ever get to the Senate floor. Choma, 2013. Money plays a leading role in the relationship between interest groups and politicians. U.S. Representative Henry Waxman, 2009, states, "The widespread view of money's role in politics is simply that it is bad. It is more useful to think of money as a political fact of life and develop a realist's understanding of how it flows and influences the business of Washington. Money is as important to the substantive work of Congress as a bill or an election. Everything intertwines." Waxman has a very liberal voting history, and he stays consistent across the board, but like most politicians, he votes in his own self-interest. In 2009, he voted yes to Senate pay raises and no to reducing Social Security tax. And his financial contribution from energy and commerce groups from 1998 to 2010 election cycles rose 1,100% after Waxman gained seniority on those committees. While Waxman is not one of the most abusive representatives, and his record does not show him being swayed heavily by contributions, his influence can be useful in other ways. Brill, 2010, brings this point to light with his on-the-background interview with a lobbyist who told him how using the two essentials of successful lobbying, personal relationships, and money, he got a boost from two Democrats in the House who wanted to help us and whom we knew well through prior associations and have helped raise money for. They provided important support for preemption, even though they vocally backed the overall reform bill. They said, "I can't be with you on the bill," he continues, "but show me where I can help you out, then give me some backup," which came in the form of a white paper on preemption, prepared by the American Bankers Association. The result was a compromise allowing limited federal preemption. NP. This is an example of how interest groups can use officials who do not seem to support them publicly, and the officials continue the pay-to-play politics at their constituents' expense. While one may think that lobby success is determined by policies enacted, lobbyists can be successful supporting officials without the expectation of support on a bill, especially when the representative will come through when it really matters to the organization. Once a bill comes up that is important to a group, they cannot offer more money to legislators, but they can lobby, and the more important the bill, the more pressure the group will impose. Gordon, 2001. How interest groups affect policy. There are times when the interest group expect results. This is clearly demonstrated after the Virginia Tech student killed 32 students and faculty in April 2007. The Bush administration proposed legislation that would require states to share the names of all residents involuntarily committed to mental hospitals, creating a database that would be regularly updated to the FBI to help prevent the sale of guns to the mentally ill. Congress wanted to get the support of the NRA. They made two concessions on the legislation that ultimately hamstringed the database. The NRA wanted states to change the way they deemed one, mentally defective, and excluding people who were no longer under psychiatric care. They also pushed for a way to get the mentally ill's gun rights reinstated if they could prove in court they were rehabilitated. Subsequently, the NRA was able to get support from both sides of the aisle to get those concessions met. To establish NRA support for the bill, states would have to set up gun rights restoration programs. Ultimately, the data sharing programs would have to be paid for by each state to get federal grants and incentives to run the data sharing program. A gun rights restoration program would have to be in place, or the states would not be entitled to federal money for data sharing. While the constituents may want bills like these passed, groups like the NRA are poised to get policymakers to water down legislation or even shoot it down altogether. Sapien, 2013. Due to the expense of effectively run campaigns, public officials seem to need interest groups to support their agendas financially, but the cost officials pay can be extremely high, especially when it comes to public opinion. There are countless examples of how interest groups use their money, power, and influence to affect policies implemented. While running for president, Barack Obama often stated a need for sweeping ethics reform, and on June 27, 2007, he responded to the ethics and lobbying reform bill being stalled in Congress by saying, Obama, 2007. These cynical partisan maneuverings on ethics reform are exactly what allows the lobbyists and special interests to stand in the way of progress on the issues that matter to the American people. This is why the oil industry continues to hold sway over energy policy, and the drug industry has blocked reform that would lower prices for Americans. It is time for Congress to finally pass the strongest possible ethics reforms as soon as possible so that the voices of average Americans are heard in Washington once more. NP. Brill, 2009, suggest the president is just as guilty as the lobbyist. When considering the position of Elizabeth Warren, chair of the congressional panel overseeing troubled assets relief programs, complexity is our enemy. The more complex these bills are, she complains, the more they can outgun us. Brill, 2009, stresses complexity is the modern lobbyist's greatest ally. And P. So, in 2009, when President Obama proposed the financial reform bill, 2,319 pages. Healthcare bill, 906 pages, and the economic stimulus, 407 pages. He brought quite a bit of complexity to Capitol Hill with such large bills. And unintelligible legalese, there are representatives who rely on some interest groups to interpret the bills. Lobbies pounce on opportunities such as these. They will grab senior staff, benefactors, and tell them how they should reword bills so they can pass. Now, depending on whom you believe, these changes could mean better protections for some and a worse economy for the average American. To the contrary of modern politics, in 1914, establishing the Federal Trade Commission, with its sweeping commerce and antitrust regulation, was a mere 8 pages, and the 1935 Social Security Act, which also included unemployment compensation, child welfare services, and a complex allotment to states for aid to dependent children, which was 28 pages. Despite his rhetoric on lobbying, lobbyists in 2009 spent a record $3.5 billion to make concessions on these bills. These complicated bills gave lobbyists a lot of opportunities to interpret these complexities according to their ideologies. Brill, 2010. When considering political interest groups' influence, the impartial judicial branch does not usually come to mind. However, Lessig, 2009, reports how Supreme Court Justice Brent Benjamin cast a shadow of doubt on the integrity of the entire judicial branch because of campaign donations and perceived bias presiding over a major contributor's case. There is nothing illegal or nefarious about judges taking contributions from citizens for their campaigns. But when that same judge is presiding over a major contributor's litigation, it appears unethical and breeds cynicism. As elections and campaigns require more and more money, private wealth becomes a bigger concern. Public officials' dependence on private wealth for tenure has the potential to foster corruption, not blatant corruption like bribery, but a more subtle corruption that can buy influence and policy. Public officials, self-interest, and interest groups. Interest groups have been able to establish relationships with members of every branch of government, and they have established their influence on the policies that these officials make. However, policy and influence are not the only deals being brokered between public officials and interest groups. They are also brokering officials' careers upon leaving their respective seats in office. This is especially true with the legislative branch. When considering where the interest of our elected representatives lie, we must consider the fact that Open Secrets blog revealed 26 of the 106 identified members of the 112th Congress who left had taken jobs lobbying. Boskma, 2013. McGrath, 2007, brings perspective when he quotes Rosenthal, 2001. Former legislators are among the most effective lobbyists in the state capitol and certainly perceived to be among the most influential, page 198. The proverbial revolving door does present huge ethical concerns. The idea of former legislators, representatives, or their staff transitioning between public service and the private sector warrants a closer look. McGrath, 2007, points out the obvious: a former legislator, staffer, or official moving from public service into the private sector at a significantly higher salary, using the knowledge, experience, and contacts gained at taxpayers' expense to advance the narrow self-interest of the new lobbying employer against the interest of American companies and employers, p. 198. These issues, coupled with the notion that legislators legislate matters of self-interest, determine what is considered ethical and unethical, and write the laws that govern their interaction with interest groups. One could conclude that lawmakers chip away at their constituents' confidence when they handle matters of self-interest, especially when the media sheds light on alleged corruption and lavish lifestyles of legislators. Weber, 1999. Conclusion. Interest groups have gained a permanent foothold in American politics, and while they are not going away, there are many who want to limit the influence they have on policies that are enacted. While there may be reasons to justify limitations, one must consider that interest groups have contributed to favorable landmark legislation. Some of the tactics employed by interest groups are divisive and breed corruption. The fact remains that it is their constitutional right to petition government. Reform does not get to the essence of the problem. The problem stems from the narrow viewpoint of the interest group's politics and their dejection of political impartiality, as well as political unity. Reforms to strengthening governmental institutions like political parties, Congress, or the office of the president would be beneficial. Congress would be the most effective place to start considering legislators writing laws that regulate their own self-interest, creating a neutral body to make certain political decisions, such as salaries, interaction with interest groups, and redistricting would reduce many of these issues. While our political system is flawed, it has managed to stand for almost 240 years, and we have overcome many hurdles. Political interest groups are just another hurdle for the American government to overcome. References: Boskma, J. 2013, February 27th. Revolving Door Works for Staffers 2. Retrieved from opensecrets.org. www.opensecrets.org/news/2013/revolving-door-works-for-staffers-2 HTML. Brill, S. 2010. On Sale, Your Government. Time, 176-2, pages 28 to 35. Choma, R. 2013, February 27th. Open Secrets blog. Retrieved from opensecrets.org. Jerry, 2011, April 26th. 10 of the biggest lobbies in Washington. Retrieved from Business Pundit. Gordon, S. V. 2001. All votes are not created equal. Campaign contributions and critical votes. Journal of Politics 63, 1, page 249. Guinier, L., 2008. Beyond Electocracy, Rethink the Political Representative as Powerful Stranger. The Modern Law Review, 1-35. Lessig, L., 2009. What Everybody Knows and What Too Few Accept. Harvard Law Review, 104-119. Loomis, C. M., 2009. The Politics of Uncertainty, Lobbyist and Propaganda in Early 20th Century America. The Journal of Political History, 187-213. McGrath, C. 2007. Lobby and the 2006 U.S. Midterm Elections. Journal of Public Affairs, 192-203. Neihart, N. 2006. A Consensus for Reform, Connecticut Lawmakers Opt for Public Financing. National Civic Review, pages 3-10. Obama, B. 2007, June 27th. Obama Statement on Stalled Ethics Reform in Congress. Online by Peters, G. and Woolley, J.T. The American Presidency Project. Retrieved from Barack Obama. http://www.presidency.ucsb.edu/PID=90983. On the Issues. 2012, December 27th. Retrieved from ONTHeissues.org. Every political leader on every political issue. Sapien, J. 2013, January 24th. How the NRA Undermined Congress's Last Push for Gun Control. Retrieved from propublica.org. www.propublic.org/article/how-the-NRA-gain-the-last-time-Congress-strengthen-gun-laws. Waxman, H. 2009. The Waxman Report, Joshua Green, ed. New York, 12 Hatchet Book Group. Weber, R. E. 1999. The Quality of State Legislative Representation, A Critical Assessment. Journal of Politics, 609. Wilson, Q. J. 2009. American Government. Mason, Ohio. Singage Learning.